Robby Soave, welcome to Dad Saves America.
Great to be with you.
I have been watching Rising for a long time, and so I'm excited to talk about all things media with you. It's a very weird time for us as Americans, for us as parents. Like, I watched the presidential debate with my son. He's 19. He technically can vote in the fall. And it's not the kind of quality of conversation I would like to be able to have, in theory, about American civics.
Yeah, it's bad.
So let's start with the moment we're in, because it's a media moment that's really weird.
Yes, I think we are learning that the media was not very transparent with us, or maybe they just did their jobs really poorly. That the story that our president, Joe Biden, is not in a good place cognitively. It's something the media failed to admit for weeks. Either they knew and they helped cover it up, or they didn't know and they did a bad job reporting it. I mean, a month ago, if we go back to that, remember there were those several videos of Biden at an event with world leaders, and he looked real bad on camera. He looked very confused, disoriented, and the media, headline after headline, Washington Post, New York Times, The Atlantic, CNN, MSNBC, they all said these are unfair, misleading videos designed to trick you into thinking that Joe Biden is too old. Then we had the debate. How has that narrative held up?
There's obviously been this, the right up to like days prior, feeding montages of, this is the best Biden we've ever had. Yes. He's sharp. So it was active lying or active misrepresentation as much as it was trying to suppress dissent that this is not going well. There was that report on his age, and then the Wall Street Journal did a piece that was separate that also interviewed a lot of people on the Hill about the state of his cognitive capabilities, and that was roundly just made fun of and decried. So there's a gut impulse here, especially if you're like not a fan of Joe Biden, whether you like Trump or not, to be like, well, this is just the usual like media in league with the Democratic Party. It's just manifest corruption. Why is anyone surprised about this?
Yeah.
It does feel different, though, in ways that I don't know why it feels different. Like the level of lie, the stakes of the lie. So how do you think about that?
You can tell that the media, Biden has been doing the media on easy mode for the entirety of his presidency. You can tell because now that's over. It's been very different for him in the last 2 weeks. The media has treated him like they treat Trump. They have been savage. They have been, I noticed in transcripts now of his comments in the New York Times, they're including like the stutter words, the incoherence. They used to just edit all that out. I mean, they do that for a lot of people to, make you sound a little bit more. They take out the ums and the pauses. They're not doing that anymore. They're savage to him.
They're even fact checking him.
Well, I think some of them believe wrongly that they can force him from the ticket. The media, and I'm painting with a broad brush. The media is a lot of different people and institutions who have different sets of priorities and different levels of political bias, etc. I think some people in the media think their best chance to stop Trump, their partisans who hate Trump, is to now go as hard as they can against Biden and get him to drop out. That is not going to work. I'm telling you, he's not going anywhere. I think there's like a low chance, but they're acting like it's a certainty, like he's done. Why would he go? Why would he do that? He wants to be president again. They all do. All of our political figures, we're learning, would rather die in office than enjoy a nice retirement. It's very unhealthy. It's true of Trump, too. His entire party turned against him multiple times, and
Yes.
He said, screw you, I want to be president again. They're all like that. That's what we're really finding out, is Biden and Trump have a lot in common.
Hey there, friends. I just thought I'd cut in because this is an unusual moment for unusual times. Obviously, Robby made a bet there that didn't play out. He's got a lot of great things to say. You should stick with the conversation because most of it doesn't hinge on whether or not President Biden is, or as you know, is no longer running for re-election. But yeah, things are changing quick in the political world these days, aren't they? All right, back to it.
Well, it is interesting because on that commonness front, you now have Biden taking to his rallies and decrying the media, and as well as actually having lock him up chants. So the like layers of irony here like are endless. It seems like you're based in DC, right? So
Yes.
you're living and breathing the political all the time, and you're on a daily political show. The part I don't understand, though, is if you even sort of kind of believe that Donald Trump represents an existential threat to democracy, to the republic, to our constitutional order, whatever. And sure, he didn't burn the country entirely to the ground in his first term, but now he's going to be unhinged. It's sort of like the worst of all possible worlds. This is a real bad strategy to try to stop America's Hitler, isn't it? Like, wouldn't you have been trying to keep, if you knew Biden was in such a difficult place cognitively, so it clearly incapable of like presenting to the public and to the world as being a capable president, wouldn't you be like, we got to have an open primary. We need to start this conversation now. We're screwed. Like, right?
Yeah, one gets the feeling that behind the scenes, behind closed doors, I think a lot of media figures and Democratic officials don't necessarily buy their own spin on how dangerous Trump is. And then you have to, if we're talking about the media people, we do have to keep in mind, and I don't know how much this actually motivates people's behavior in the industry, but a Trump presidency would be good for the media financially. It'll be good. I mean, for their declining viewership numbers on cable news and failing subscriptions, it would be the best thing that could possibly happen to them. They've been laying off. CNN just did another round of layoffs. It's been a rough couple years for the media because Biden is boring from a media perspective, and Trump is a cartoon character. He's a content creator. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
In addition
literally.
to representing something that they don't like and disagree with, they gain subscriptions during the Trump presidency. So they have that to look forward to if he comes back.
There is this very interesting thing that's taken shape in new ways, which is the way in which audience capture happens now. So, like at the level of sort of the structure of the news media business, we now have this thing where the New York Times is always left of center. They were carrying water for Stalin, et cetera, et cetera. But as a paper that got distributed to newsstands across the country, the relationship with the reader, I think, was different than a business model in which your subscribers become your primary audience and create this positive feedback loop where, like, why would we want to upset our, like, liberal elite, college educated white women that buy our subscription?
Yeah.
So therefore, it's really not in their interest to upset those people. And vice versa on the right. Like, everyone's
Yeah.
kind of captured by their audience now in this world of subscriptions and infinite choice. How do you understand what's happened to news and to reporting into your industry as a result of these technological changes?
For sure, you've hit upon a really interesting dynamic that I contemplate a lot, and it is true for conservative and alternative and dissident perspectives and platforms as well. I think back to, like, let's say you owned a newspaper 40 or 50 years ago. How would you even know who your most popular writer or columnist or feature was? You'd have to run like a survey or something,
Right.
coupon if you mail it back in, and you'd find out that, the crossword's everyone's most popular feature. They sold advertisement, and advertisements was the business model, and what the content was actually didn't matter all that much. It used to be kind of boring, the content in a lot of newspapers. That's what local news was, a lot of, not, I mean, important to the people who live in the community, don't get me wrong, but not the kind of thing we see in newspapers now, because the quality of the content didn't need to be exciting. It didn't need to be telling the readers what they want to hear in terms of their perspective. We have much better analytics now. I write for a magazine that has it's a nonprofit reason, donors, etc. And then my show on YouTube, Through the Hill, is that's an advertising model. But you do, because of the analytics. I see every day let's say we made 10 different videos. I see which ones perform well. I see which headlines and how they were packaged perform well.
See where people drop off. You see
Yes.
the comments. You see if you take a different take, and people are like, I don't want that.
And I'm never gonna say something I don't believe or I don't think, because that's a short-sighted strategy, and you'll eventually lose the trust of people if you're just literally going to tell everyone exactly what they want to hear all the time.
It's also personally corrosive.
Yeah, it's bad. But you can find out which subjects the audience likes more, and that's the true filtering effect. If they just want to hear about, like, COVID ended up being a good match. I was really interested in the COVID policies. I was really opposed to all the mandates. The audience had high interest in that subject. That's all I wanted to talk about. That's a lot of what we did for 3 years. But, then other things don't get talked about. It's not censorship, but it's what the audience wants and expects. And I've said this so many times. If your readers, your subscribers, your audience, you can tell them something they don't want to hear some of the time. You can talk about things they're not interested. You can learn, you can walk them along the path to appreciate new things. But if you consistently are oblivious to or ignorant of what they're expecting, you will fail in the media every single time.
I had Bill de Blasio on this show, and it did not go over well with my audience.
Yeah, I bet.
It's a right of center audience, which is I don't like to think of this stuff in terms of left right. I'm very libertarian, which makes me not exactly left right along some dimensions. But yeah, it was like literally like, nope, not watching this guy. And we had actually quite a pretty jovial conversation. I didn't hit him on COVID stuff because it wasn't what it was about. But it's also like, well, what am I going to say? Like, you're the worst.
Yeah, it's not.
Like, what am I going to say to him? I know he's going to defend that he was working with the information he had at the time, and it's just not the way I understand what I'm doing with this. Even so, no, didn't work. It was like, okay, maybe a debate would have been better. Like, let's have him debate somebody else, and I will, like, watch and eat popcorn with the audience. I don't know. Have there been ways that you've found that you can bring a subject to the people that appreciate your perspective, that challenges them and is more likely to open ears than not?
Well, the good thing about my show, Rising, is it's a debate show. It's right-left debate show.
Yep.
Now, like you, I'm not exactly I get lumped in with the right, but I'm a libertarian. But I'm representing conservative views. So if there's an issue where I'll sometimes say, well, maybe I don't personally feel this way. Immigration, I'm more libertarian than where the right is now, certainly on immigration. So I'll say, well, I'm personally more supportive of immigration than a lot of people on the right, but here's what I think a conservative or a Republican would respond to this argument, and we'll have the debate along those lines. And I have a rotating co-host at the moment, but people who span from the very far left to just kind of center-left Democrats. And sometimes I'll have two of those people on at the same time, and they end up fighting more than anyone else. I mean, the level of disagreement, and that happens with people on the right, too. You're pro-Trump and anti-Trump people who agree on like 95% of policies, just screaming at each other for personal reasons. And the left has that same dynamic. There'll be this stop the vote. I didn't know what that was until I started co-hosting the show. This was this seminal moment in Democratic circles where they, or force the vote, excuse me. That's what it was, to try to stop Nancy Pelosi from becoming the speaker several years ago, hold up her vote. And it's this very obscure thing that everyone on the left knows about. Like, they remember where they were when force the vote was happening. I have no idea what this is.
I don't remember that.
That's like a thing on the right. Do you know what I mean?
It's like the tyranny of small differences, or the desire for some kind of purity. And it is maybe a particular kind of psychological profile that wants purity. I probably fall into that camp. It gets, I think, mediated by having spent a good amount of my life in New Jersey, I think.
Well, it happens in libertarian circles, too. The Libertarian Party has had this some conflict between the Mises Caucus people and other people in the party, and I'm like, man, I think we all agree on like 99% of policies here. Is there a reason this needs to be so argumentative? This is like, it's not healthy anymore.
If you're not opposed to or in favor of fractional reserve banking, get out of the room. I don't want to talk to you. You are a communist.
Right.
So here we are with an intransigent president who it seems like is getting a lot of support from an increasingly tight inner circle, including his immediate family. And a media that has suddenly realized, oh, we don't like this anymore. and now we're at war effectively with the head of the party that something north of 90% of people in the news media business, according to some research, vote for and are card-carrying members of. So yeah, what's your prediction? You sort of alluded to he's not going anywhere.
I don't think he's going anywhere.
Why? What are you expecting is going to happen?
So the most common error I hear people utter when they discuss this, I hear this all the time. I'll hear someone say, they are going to switch him out. They won't let him run at this point. I always say, who is they? Who are you talking about? There is no they. The they in the Democratic Party is Joe Biden. The they in the Republican Party is Donald Trump. This is not the 19th century where a smoke-filled room of cigar-smoking party leaders picked the ticket based on back then, even sometimes the incumbent president was dropped from the ticket because the smoke-filled room of party bosses decided, no, in this election we want someone from Ohio and someone from a Southern Democrat turned Republican. Like, this is the ticket we want to concoct. They had control and they had factions they were dealing with. That dynamic is gone. There is no independent leadership in either of the party. The leader of the party is the candidate. So no one can make him go. I mean, literally no one can make him go. He already won the delegates. They're pledged to vote for him. He would have to release them. They could technically all mutiny, is my understanding, but I've read the reporting with people talking to the delegates, and the delegates all say that they're backing Biden unless he tells them not to. So there is no they to make him go. He can only go if he himself decides it, and I see no indication that he's going to do that.
What about just this week, the story of the week on this front is George Clooney as the avatar for the super elite high dollar donor class that is now saying, no, Joe, you've got to go. So do you think that donors in our system play enough influence that they could push Joe Biden out of his second term?
Nope. I don't. Look, they can damage him. I think he's not, to be clear, I don't think he's likely to be reelected president. I think his odds were bad even before the debate and all this started happening, and this is further damaging him. The polls are generally pretty accurate, actually, and the polls have had him a little bit down for a while, and now he's a lot of bit down. But by the way, Kamala Harris, I think, is likely to perform slightly better than Joe Biden based on the polling. She also looks likely to lose to Donald Trump. So then it's like, why would they go through this elaborate, unprecedented, self-destructive process of replacing him for someone who's not like a certainty to win at all, who also looks likely to lose? I mean, to be clear, they should probably try it. If I was the Democratic Party and I did have this power that I'm saying does not exist, I would switch them out at this point. But there is no one who can do that. It has to be Joe Biden. And if Joe Biden stops running for president, if he steps aside, his odds of being president again right now are like 20% or something.
Something like that.
They just go to zero. They just go to zero. What is the incentive for him to step aside? He wants the Democrats to win, but he also wants him to win. They'd have to convince him, and if I'm them, this is the strategy I would adopt. You have to convince him that his odds of being reelected are already zero. And so he loses nothing by stepping aside, and maybe the party gains something. You have to encourage him to put the party's interests above himself. But we see the problem there, which is that political leaders don't put anyone's interests above their own. Again, this happened with Trump. Mitt Romney, John McCain, the entire party, so many members of the Senate. They turned on him twice. They turned on him after Access Hollywood. They turned on him after January 6th. They all said, no, thank you. Please go away. He did not care. His conviction that he should be president again is stronger than their conviction that he shouldn't. And we're seeing the same dynamic on the Democratic side. So I don't think, look, I could be wrong. I don't think there's zero chance he drops out. I think it is extraordinarily unlikely.
It's interesting to hear you say that, especially as sort of a Politico, because I think for the general public, and especially for those of us that don't live in DC where you can't escape this conversation at all, it feels likely because we're opening up every screen, like, oh no, any day. It's like, it feels like any day now there's going to be the press conference.
It feels like that. And you're right. This is a hot take. Even most, probably many political journalists I know in DC expect him to go away. But remember, he's already won the nomination. He just has to hang on. He has to, by taking no action, he confirms himself as the Democratic candidate. He could have a bad health situation, I mean, his health already seems not good.
Yeah.
He could, if he had a stroke or he had a bad fall or something, do I think he would step aside? Yes. I don't think this is impossible. I just think it's not likely given how political operators handle things. Like, Dianne Feinstein died in office. Chuck Grassley ran for re-election. He's 90. Ruth Bader Ginsburg stayed on the Supreme Court, costing Democrats a vote for like a generation, and over and over and over and over again. People now, political leaders don't retire. They don't step aside when they're caught in sex scandals or financial scandals, the things that used to cause
Gary Hart.
Right. Yeah. That guy, are you kidding? That guy would have never gone away if that sort of thing. You could have an orgy with like 6 prostitutes of every gender. There's probably more than 6 now, and you would not go away, right? We don't have that accountability anymore. I don't know what it says about our society. We don't have as much democratic accountability. They just hang on. It's a marvel Cuomo resigned. Governor Cuomo in New York, honestly. What's his name? Al Franken. He would have never resigned if that had not happened at like the height of Me Too.
Oh, right. And it was for a picture.
He regrets resigning. He said he regrets resigning.
Well, because he's looking around.
It was kind of dumb, honestly.
He's looking around and is like, so I had a jokey picture pretending to grope a soldier while I was actually on like a comedy tour celebrating the troops, and I'm going to resign for that compared to like people. Like, it's crazy the things that.
I mean, we have people who just stay in office now forever. We have the oldest, by average age, Congress we've ever had in American history. The average age of people has gone up and up. It's just hard to get. By the way, other countries don't have this problem. I think this has to do with like the parliamentary system versus our winner-take-all system. You know, they do have a more independent party mechanism in other countries where they say, okay, we can see your favorability is now down. We're swapping you for another leader. That just doesn't happen here.
There seems to be a kind of chaos in politics across the West. How do you understand? Do you have a kind of poli-sci theory of the moment we're in that's broader than just this election cycle? Because obviously Europe, they got different systems, but France just had an election that I don't fully understand where Le Pen, who I think is mostly gross.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, so now you get sort of like right-wing authoritarianism, but with kind of socialism policies. Who's liking this?
Yeah.
But it did look like the Le Pen party actually got more votes even in the second round, and yet I don't know how that works. It doesn't strike me as like, oh, we should try their system on for size. It's just got a different set of weirdnesses. The UK's gotten crazy. So what's your theory? Do you have a theory?
I mean, look, there's clearly a lot of dissatisfaction with political incumbents, with the kind of, I think, technocratic elite that, especially in Europe, has been in power for a while. There's so much concerns about immigration in both Europe and the U.S. I mean, polls show us in the U.S. this is the top issue. And again, I'm someone who wants legal immigration, thinks that immigrants are very important we can't build things without a labor supply. That, my grandparents and great-grandparents were immigrants from Italy and Germany, and they were spat upon when they got off the boat, and they were hated the way you hear some of the rhetoric about immigrants today, and they've helped make this country great. So I generally have that same feeling about immigrants. Obviously, the chaos at the southern border is not good, and it's to have people, swimming across rivers in unsafe conditions for them and then contributing to instability on the border is not good. We need to, reform the policies so people can come here legally. I think basically everyone supports that. Congress just won't do anything. But, there is a concern and a fear about immigrants, about crime and instability that in America is not closely actually correlated. I mean, we have, to the extent we have crime problems, it's not disproportionately immigrants. That might be different in Europe. I haven't looked as closely. In Europe, I think it's that maybe the cultural fears about the waves of refugees they're dealing with might have more validity.
Islam's played a part in the concerns in Europe. We
have people, right? The people entering our country illegally. I mean, you think whatever you want about illegal immigration, but it's like Catholics who fleeing socialism. They're probably more conservative and family-oriented than the existing population.
I do like to say, if we could orchestrate a swap of gender studies graduates for Mexican Catholics, I would do a 2-for-1 deal
I have this argument
every
with
day
people,
of the week and twice on Sunday.
Thank you. I have this argument with people on the right all the time where they're talking about how our values are going to be dilute, our culture is under siege from immigrants. And I'm like, by your logic, the people, you right-wing man, the person who is most against your views, your worldview, who wants to change America most in a way that you don't agree with, they are wealthy and white. Their ancestors came over on the Mayflower, and they have a graduate degree from a prestigious university. They are the most American. They've been here forever, and they are more hostile to your values than anyone, than the vast majority of the people entering our country, even illegally. So do what you want with that information, but it's just a very misplaced fear and frustration to me.
Yeah, I will say, so being sort of more radically libertarian than some, I've generally been like, pre-1924 America, where you could just basically come in through Ellis Island and chunk, and maybe you get called Smith for some reason instead of your real name, but otherwise, you don't have tuberculosis, come on in. Seem to build the greatest country the world's ever seen. I have gotten a little more worried that maybe I'm just a utopian in some respects, because it is easier to get here than it used to be. And there's other forces at work. And it does worry me when I look at some of the things about Europe, but maybe Europe's also real bad at integrating people. It's like, people go to France and they're like shunted to a ghetto forever. So then, of course, they're always blowing stuff up over there.
Yeah, and Europe has had is a place of conflicting ethnic tensions for thousands of years, right? They have we call it France and Germany and Britain, but those are even subgroups of people who have been fighting, who are forced into the same kingdom for thousands of years. The U.S., America, is founded on these really great ideals and has been successful in integration. That we are a community for people who care about the rule of law and freedom of speech and market economies and democracy, and it's worked pretty well.
Unless you're on the Columbia campus, as you've noted.
Right. It works pretty well. My again, as I said, my great grandparents were like Italians and Slavic people, and like that was considered a mixed marriage, right? Nobody said, "Oh, those are all white people." That's a new invention that they all get lumped into the same ethnic or racial category. No, their ancestors hated each other, but America solves that pretty well.
So one of the things I've noticed in our comments is the rise of a slogan, and I think even today's Wall Street Journal was talking about it. What about Project 2025? So Project 2025, which I haven't really looked at closely, I understand.
Neither has Donald Trump, he says.
I understand it to basically be the output of the Heritage Foundation and an attempt to say, like, okay, let's come up with our conservative vision of what public policy could be and how to do it so that Donald Trump, who's a delegator, let's say, has a bunch of stuff to do out of the gate. What's your understanding of Project 2025? It's playing a role as a buzzword in our politics at the moment. What's the deal from your perspective?
Yeah, the Democrats, the Biden campaign, have a concerted strategy of running against Project 2025. They have elevated it to this pivotal position to the extent that Donald Trump has kind of distanced himself from it. Like you, I have not read through all of it. Yes, it's policy ideas from the Heritage Foundation, some of which I agree with and some of which I don't. The Heritage Foundation has gone in a kind of more right-wing populist direction on foreign policy. I sort of agree with some of those ideas on sort of markets. I think it's an unhealthy direction, very wanting tariffs and all those kinds of things. I think if there's a broader guiding principle in it, they are, and I think this is the part of Project 2025 that has most freaked out Democrats or liberals, is the idea is like getting rid of bureaucrats, which I do actually think is a good idea.
Of course it is.
And this idea that, Donald Trump made the deep state coined that phrase, or made it a phrase that everyone knows what it is now. And then people on the other side want to pretend it's not true. No. There is not this massive federal bureaucracy of progressives who are running the government independent of what any of the political leadership says. Now we're in this moment with Joe Biden, so clearly out of it, where they're trying, like the defense, his people are saying, don't worry about this. There's this permanent federal bureaucracy of deep-seated ideological progressives who are actually running the government, which is exactly what the deep state theory is. Correct. So look, I think, and I would think this way, if Democrats come in and there's a massive federal bureaucracy full of right-wing people, I mean, imagine if that were the case, that's insane, but
I mean,
yeah, obviously they would replace them to implement the policies they want. The idea that, this is what I really don't like is Fauci-type people who have just in government forever and have their own agenda and operate in a basically progressive way, but are independent of political considerations. Well, I don't think that's a good system. And to the extent Project 2025 is taking aim at some of that, I do support having democratic accountability, having the people who actually win office. Not that this is the greatest system ever, but it's better than having a permanent government class that just does whatever they want and has no accountability.
this is the thing about the protect our democracy sloganeering that cuts in a lot of directions. It's as if they're swinging like a mace around, and every so often it hits them in the face and they just keep swinging it. It's like, okay, so you're the protect democracy crowd, but you're now aligned to kick out the guy that actually won the primary for your own party. So that's weird. You're the protect democracy crowd, but you're really upset that the Supreme Court has limited the power of the unelected
Yes.
administrative state with the Chevron deference ruling.
Yes.
So wait, but so you realize what that means. Well, how do you understand the Chevron case? 'Cause
Yeah,
it's tied to this stuff.
Absolutely. This was an outcome that many libertarians, including myself, have wanted for a long time. Just saying that the administrative agencies, they can't just make their own rules. Our system gives, under our original conception of how the U.S. government works, gives most of the powers to the legislature. Says Congress makes laws, and then the presidency carries them out. And what has happened over time is that Congress no longer wants to do anything, govern, legislate. It's reality TV, it's entertainment. They just want to talk on TV, yell at each other. They're not really doing anything. So the executive has supreme power, and then this independent bureaucracy just does all of the policies they want. The level of deference they've gotten to do that has been very bad. So this ruling is just saying, no, if you're going to totally wholesale invent a new policy and you're some agency of the federal government, no, you need a clear mandate from Congress to do that. That is pro-democracy. That's saying the people we vote into office, that we have some say over, they're the ones, and then they can suffer the retribution in terms of the ballot box if they pass policies we don't like. I mean, that's how it's supposed to work.
It seems like there's these two threads. I actually brought this up with my de Blasio conversation, and he was like, oh, you actually, you kind of know what the progressive era was about. He was like, it was very trivial in a way, but civics education in America being what it is, any knowledge of it kind of seems interesting. You have two threads in progressivism, it seems like to me. You have a populism that gives rise to stuff like senators being elected instead of appointed, and William Jennings Bryant type of energy, the Bernie Sanders, we the people, democracy now. But then you have the Claudine Gay type, the Woodrow Wilson, Princeton, expert elite class. The people are stupid. Let's create the Fed, which is totally unaccountable, independent agency. Oh, the most progressive Elizabeth Warren concocts an agency, and let's house it in the Fed and have the Fed print its budget. And like the least democratic institution, I'm talking about the Consumer Product Safety Commission or whatever it is, the CFPB.
The Consumer Protection, they're terrible.
It's like the least democratic institution maybe ever conceived in American history by the so-called progressive Elizabeth Warren. How do you co-host a show with I would say the ideological spectrum on Rising, tends to be broad.
Yeah.
You've got people just are like socialists. How do you understand the threads of progressivism, even as you kind of interact with the people on your show?
You're right that that's a very smart difference you're articulating between kind of the technocratic elite progressive liberalism and progressive left type people. My audience has a substantial audience of people who I think they think of themselves as populists, and for them that actually spans a lot of right-left issues. The audience under the previous host, Crystal and Sagar, who were hosted the show 3 years ago before I came aboard, it got a big audience of pro Bernie Sanders people, and so the audience was very left in a lot of ways. Although what does left mean on foreign policy now, right? That kind of aligns with what the right thinks on foreign policy. When COVID hit, I noticed a split on the left, even in terms of the audience, is that along exactly those lines. The people who are like, trust the experts, the experts are Fauci and Birx and the CDC and the people in government. They've got this man. And the people on the left who are anti-pharmaceutical companies and you see that in like the trajectories of the careers of people like Glenn Greenwald and Kim Iverson, who was hosting my show for a while, or Jimmy Dore or Russell Brand going one way, and then the other people going the other way. So that is a very important difference. Now, as a libertarian, I also think populism is flawed in a lot of ways. I think the novel insight that libertarianism has is that the populism versus technocratic elite, they're fighting over, well, the elites are bad and, evil and morally depraved and can't run our society. The people know what they want. And then the elites are saying, no, the people have no expertise. They don't understand policy. They would vote for bad policies. The elites know. What our observation is that, well, the elites are bad and wrong and the people are bad and wrong. Everyone is bad at making decisions for others.
Yes.
Everyone is bad at governing someone else's life. So what we want to do is take that decision-making out of the power of the elites, but also out of the power of the people. I don't want my life decided by other people if they have a graduate degree or not. They're no better at it than anyone else. So I think that's our distinguishing characteristic, libertarians.
There's the old H.L. Mencken saying that the people know what they want and deserve to get it good and hard.
Yep. There's a lot of truth to that.
It's actually a hard time to talk like that, insofar as A, it sounds like you're just an elite jerk.
Yeah.
And B, I think the energy around a sense that there is a kind of elite that isn't just a kind of typical, people that are in the upper echelon, but there's a class. There's a sort of shared life. Charles Murray talks about it in his book Coming Apart. Like, he talks about the areas that you and I live in, like Austin, Texas, or the DC area, or the New York, New Jersey, super zip codes where we're latte sipping, cosmopolitan suburbanites, and we've never even watched a NASCAR race or blah blah blah.
Or chopped our own wood or anything. Yeah.
I've chopped plenty of wood myself. But that being said, it's like, and then there's like the rest of the country, and it also maps against sort of the urban rural divide, which I've seen firsthand as being very profound in this country in particular. Maybe it's everywhere. I think it is everywhere in Europe. But how do you think about politics through that lens of like urban versus rural, and where at the level of the public, like where these things are breaking?
Yeah, class differences are so important in our society. They're so politically relevant. And actually, the media has done everything they can to minimize class issues because the way they see conflict and social dynamics in our society is purely through the lens of race at all times. They have tried to make race the most salient dividing issue in our country in modern times. Race has become the salient thing the media talks about, when actually class, if you look at data, there's a lot of arguments that class is the more salient thing, is where you actually come across fundamental differences in values people have and how people want to live. I mean, Donald Trump is like gaining ground with racial minorities, because race is actually becoming less salient. Education level is the most like politically deterministic for if you're a Republican or Democrat now, is becoming not just how much money you make, but how elite your education is. So that's where the fundamental difference, a desire to live in different ways. And I just, I want people to live in accordance with whatever works for them, dude. That's fine by me. It's okay. Different people can be different. It's like, it's as simple as that. But if we're going to have this intense winner-take-all system with very high stakes, and there are high stakes because decisions get made now at the highest level by this permanent bureaucracy. I mean, COVID showed it when the elites really humiliated themselves. Our entire pandemic response for the entire country in the hands of a cabal of bureaucrats who were not elected and whose guidance ended up being really bad, and who maybe caused the thing in the first place with the stupid things they were funding.
And who were literally throwing out their own rule books that they had written themselves.
Yeah, they made it up. They said that the 6 feet of social distancing was made up on the spot. They've admitted that.
It's like, here's a deep cut nerd thing, but it's like FDR apparently at the transition out of the gold standard would literally wake up and be like, I think gold should be worth like $26. What do you think? It's like, oh, yeah, this doesn't feel like a problem to have someone who's also in constant chronic pain just deciding on a whim what the value of money should be.
Talking about the media covering up the health conditions of the president. And, I would have said that could never happen today because the media is too adversarial. But it couldn't have happened for well, I don't know. Maybe it did happen. I was correcting myself. I don't think Biden was this bad off the whole time, but I guess I wouldn't have known if he was.
This does raise an interesting question, which is, are we better off today as in the information landscape or not? Now, and I'm inclined towards yes. I'm inclined towards we are better off today at a time when you basically had a tiny, closed, white knuckle closed faucet that dripped, and that's the way it is from Walter Cronkite. That was propagandized 20th century stuff. It's hard to know what's true today, but we knew that was false. That was Gulf of Tonkin time. At least now we get to see Abu Ghraib. So we get to watch the Afghan pullout.
I could not agree more.
Yeah, talk more about that from your perspective.
I mean, there is too much romanticizing the past just in general, but that is so true of the media. Yeah, they could manufacture an entire consensus for foreign policy, especially, because there was no adversarial or critical media. Like I said, they covered up the infirmity of FDR for his entire presidency, which lasted 1,000 years. Newspapers created the Spanish-American War was created by the media, and there was no. Your local paper used to be called the Tennessee Republican. It was ostensibly, it was completely aligned with the party. Now we have a very adversarial media. We have a very there's so many more sources of information. Social media has given rise to a lot of independent, alternative, contrarian perspectives. The right, I get so frustrated when the right starts complaining about social media. I'm like, your Daily Wire, Daily Caller, Town Hall, Blaze, all of you people, you would not exist without social media. Without Facebook. You should be thanking Mark Zuckerberg every day that he created this thing that allowed you guys to get vast reach. And I agree. I think it's good. I think the platforms have been so good for exactly what you described, making sure you actually do see the pictures from the atrocities in the Middle East or wherever else. And some of those pictures are wrong and misleadingly edited. And yes, there's...
the worst is yet to come.
Possible for that to happen, but I'll take that over... Yeah, just Walter Cronkite can tell you whatever, and there's no one to disagree because there's just a handful of networks and a handful of media sources. We don't have that anymore, and I think it is absolutely good. And social media has played a positive role in that. There's just way too much complaining about social media these days. I'm a social media techno-optimist person. That's what my second book is about. And because both Republicans and Democrats will just hold these hearings where they haul the tech CEOs before them and they just scream at them incoherently and they demand new legislation to destroy their companies. And Republicans and Democrats want to do this. And I think we'd go back to the Walter Cronkite era if they had it their way.
It's pretty clear that that is what the elite class wants. They want to turn all of this stuff off.
Yes.
And you see it especially with the sort of I guess they're baby boomers, this sort of boomer what's that with the tubes and the TikToks and shut that all down. Can't we just shut that all down? This hasn't been in the news lately, but I think it's really important. TikTok. What's your sense about TikTok as a platform? If I remember correctly, and this is going to sound stupid because I just don't remember, didn't they pass a ban on TikTok?
They did.
Sorry to be
they're
that
banning
happen?
it.
I'm kind of forgetting that happened.
So the law requires the parent company ByteDance to sell it to an American company or be banned. So I'm against this. Now, I think there are certainly criticisms you can make of social media companies, and I think, if we're talking harms to children, for instance. Look, anything done in excess can be harmful. If they were playing their Game Boys all day long, too, that would not be healthy either. You should get some exercise. You should pay attention, be engaged in school.
Robbie, it's the Switch. You got to get back.
I play my Switch. So, you're talking to a hardcore Nintendo person. But yeah, when I was a kid, My mom limited the number of hours I was allowed to play video games during the day on the weekdays, and that worked pretty well. And I understand the phone is more accessible and it's maybe difficult. You know, I don't have children myself, so I'm not trying to malign parents and the difficulties they have in keeping avoiding the screen addiction type thing. But it just doesn't seem so fundamentally different to me. Fine, they're using them in classes when they should be paying attention. Yeah, okay, they shouldn't have them then. Tell the schools shouldn't do that. Like, I don't think these problems are beyond. I think families and schools and communities can work on these problems without the extremely over the top and I would argue ultimately unconstitutional efforts to ban the platforms entirely. I mean, remember when California tried to ban violent video games? What happened? Yeah. The Supreme Court, in a decision authored by Scalia, said this is speech and cannot be. No, you cannot. The government cannot prohibit the sale of violent video games to kids. So I have to think, if it got to the Supreme Court, they'd end up saying the same thing about social media. So you asked about TikTok specifically. There are national security implications for TikTok, perhaps. I don't think those have actually been very well explained. But yes, China is an adversary. China censors things. That's bad. You should. Would they manipulate the content on the platform to like subtly send anti-American vibes to kids? Sure, I think that's perfectly plausible. But you know, Facebook and Twitter manipulated the content to appease the Biden administration in terms of COVID and in terms of Hunter Biden and everything else. So, like, we can actually deal with that problem because we could prohibit federal officials from having this censorious contact with companies. Like, let's put our own house in order. I don't think the threat from TikTok is any different than the threat from any of the other social media companies. And also, there is good stuff you can get on those platforms. People watch my show on TikTok. Clips of it go viral sometimes. I would be like, I think the content we put out is good, and taking down one of the platforms to satisfy these like really nebulous concerns seems bad to me.
How do you see the landscape changing in the short term as we approach the election? So this has been one thing that you know, this show's only 2.5 years old, and I've been very curious. Like, is it going to get weird? Are the companies going to get tight in weird ways, either actively out of political biases inside their staffs, which are overwhelmingly left of center, or just out of like, cover your ass, I don't really feel like the federal government trying to break me up right now, so I'm just going to suppress. Because that was one thing about the suppression of the Hunter Biden laptop. I'm very shocked about that Missouri case.
That was an unfortunate loss. So we need to be clear that was bad, the Missouri v. Biden case, where the Supreme Court had the opportunity to stop federal officials from messaging social media companies and implicitly threatening them to take down content. They declined to do that, so that level of pressure is going to resume. It's been on pause, and it's going to resume, and it's very bad. I will say, and this could be naive optimism on my part, I do think the social media companies are a lot more skeptical of what the government is telling them than they were before. I mean, I don't know how much comfort it is, but if you listen to Mark Zuckerberg now or some of the other tech CEOs, they're pretty mad. They're pretty embarrassed, humiliated that they went along with some of these things that now ended up being wrong on COVID and on Hunter Biden.
Yeah.
And even the moderators, because at first it was like when all that was happening, I'm like, well, man, these companies, they're progressive. They hate free speech. They're taking down all this. This is so bad. But then when you actually got to read the emails, the moderators in many cases were like, you want us to take down this account? This is fine. What are you saying? You FBI official, what are you? And then it got really threatening, and they're like, okay, I guess we have to do this. But it's not like they wanted to do it. It's that the pressure was really intense. Now that's all been publicized, which is a good thing. Yeah. So I think it's possible, maybe it's not likely. I think it's possible that this kind of thing happens again. They're going to be a little bit more unwilling to go along. I mean, they've said, Mark Zuckerberg and others have said, we would not go along with this again. So we'll see.
I remember you were a voice, maybe a lone voice, on what has become increasingly common, and that was this sort of bizarre coverage of the Covington confrontation.
Yeah.
Can you just recount what that was about? Because it's a snapshot into the way, frankly, the way media can really turn us against each other on the basis of just outright falsehoods in really destructive ways. I know it's sort of, maybe it would feel like old news, but feel like you broke the story on this.
It was my career-defining story. Yeah, I had no idea that years later that would be the thing people know me for. So what had happened is several years ago that pro-life students from a Catholic high school in the Midwest were on the Lincoln Memorial. They'd been there for the March for Life in D.C. for pro-life causes, and they were wearing the pro-Trump MAGA hats. They were on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial, like hanging out before going to their next activity. There's Catholic school boys, and there was a short video that went viral on social media that appeared to show the boys, and one boy in particular, harassing this Native American peace activist man. And like one of them was like staring him down and was in his way. And this went absurdly viral. And everyone had commented on it. And these like people were like, this is the face of Nazism, of racial hatred against the other. And they were attacked. They were savage for like 24 to 48 hours. And even conservatives weighed in and were like distancing themselves from this, 15-year-old boy.
Right.
It's crazy to think about now, but that all happened. I sat down to write about it. It was on a weekend, so I'd not been like on the clock. I sat down, I was going to write about it, and when I was sitting down to write about it, I got lucky. It so happened that the entire video, for like 2 hours of video footage surrounding that 30-second or however it had been long clip, had just become available on social media. So I started like, well, I'll watch the whole thing. I watched the whole thing. And when you watch the whole thing, it's amazing how, again, not an altered video, just a clipped video could completely wrongly present what happened. When you watch the whole thing, you realize that there had been this other group, the Black Hebrew Israelites. They're like a Farrakhan type Black nationalist group that shout at women and Jewish people and gay people just in the streets of DC. It's just a crazy group.
We used to make fun of them in Times Square because I worked at Viacom at MTV. You'd come out and there they'd be, and they were dressed sort of like Klingons.
Yeah.
So it's like, oh, here's the black Klingons screaming at people.
Yeah, screaming like anti-Jewish slurs and anti-gay slurs at just everyone who walks past. So they had been yelling they had been on the scene, and they had been antagonizing this group of high schoolers for like an hour. And the high schoolers had been pretty well behaved in response. Honestly, if anything, you were impressed by how much they did not engage absolute crazy people. And then this Native American man had intervened, had walked into their midst, intervening on behalf of the crazy Black nationalist group. They did not get in his way. They did not block his passage. That's what the narrative claimed, that the boys had blocked his passage. No. And one of the boys that was about to get in sort of a confrontation. The main focus of the ire, that kid, the fascist kid, had been like, no, don't engage. Like, don't, just leave them alone.
The exact. So they 180 opposite.
Yes. So when you watch that, you were like, huh. They acted, this was an inflamed social situation, cameras on, and they comported themselves fairly well, and the main kid comported himself completely well. So I wrote that article saying, the media got this one really wrong, and I did not know when I wrote that would be the thing I was remembered for, however many years it is later, because it went, millions of people read the article. A lot of mainstream media organizations they shared my article to set the record straight. And then some people, very left people, claimed, no, I was wrong and I was covering for fascists and, don't believe your lying eyes. And it was a whole thing.
The culture of your industry, this is an interesting window into it. And having worked in children's television at Nickelodeon, I didn't experience any of this stuff from the Dan Schneider documentary about all that horrible child exploitation and weirdness. But there is something about entertainment. Entertainment does create a commodification of humans because you're casting people based on looks and you're telling them what to do and say, often in risque ways, and that you have to treat that like a job, and that creates weirdness. It creates a weird, inhuman numbness to things. And I think it's part of why the entertainment industry is gross. It's really gross for adults on television to call 15-year-old boys fascists and try to destroy their lives for all the world to see in permanent record. So what is it about, from your perspective, inside of this world of journalism and news and covering events, what cultural forces make that such an easy thing for seeming adults who have a job that is supposed to involve some degree of integrity and responsibility and journalistic ethics to do that.
Yeah, because they tried to then in trying the people who wanted to defend how they had treated these boys, they were looking for other things. I remember all these subsequently debunked stories like, well, this wasn't their first racial incident. Here's them like doing blackface at a basketball game a year ago. It wasn't even the same school. It was just another school with the same name. It was like on a like everyone had painted their like chests like black or red or blue or something. They weren't doing blackface. Like it was crazy. Like, then what are you doing? What is wrong with you? You're trying to find a reason to ruin the lives of teenagers. You know, it is harder to be a young person these days. Frankly, because of the phone, not because of social media necessarily, but just the ability to record everything at all times. Like, there's a running transcript of your life now, sometimes a video transcript. Everything you say in text or tweet is preserved forever. And then, and the thing about young people is they do make mistakes, and they should be allowed to do that. I'm sure if you transcribed everything I said when I was a kid, I'd be horrified. But that's how it is for everyone.
Yes.
And now we hold people. We used to kind of have a broad norm that you can still get yourself in serious trouble if you do something violent or very wrong, but that young people's ideas about the world are in flux and they're growing and they need room for self-improvement. And up to 18, there's a pretty broad level of forgiveness for expressing problematic views or using problematic words. I mean, this is crazy to be saying this is some kind of crime. That's how we all used to behave. And now, because it's so easy to dig up that kind of stuff, and the media loves digging up this stuff. I love when the media will have a story like, the texts have resurfaced. Oh, did they? Did they unbury themselves in the sand? The text, it's like, digging through the sand to come. No, you unburied it because it appealed to you to ruin the life of a teenager. I think it's evil is the word for it. It's just because it's easy to do, and we need to reestablish some social norms that we still are capable of forgiveness for people, particularly young people.
All right, I'll keep this quick. If you like what you're hearing and want to hear more, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss our new content as it comes out every week. And now, back to the conversation. One of the things that is coming at us 1,000 miles an hour is the end of security through obscurity.
Yeah.
Because you used to have a mind read all this text, and that imposed a cost barrier to some of this sort of like grotesque character assassination digging. Now you can ask a large language model vague questions, and it can search virtually infinite amounts of text to find the thing that was kind of like you being racist, sort of, kind of. Like, what's Robby said in anything he's ever written that's kind of racist? And it can actually do an amazing job at doing exactly that thing. Have you thought about the implications for media, public discourse, that this kind of search in particular, forget the generative stuff and making stuff up and deepfakes, just the ability to actually search the entire corpus of any person, combined with the fact that everything's getting recorded and easily transcribed automatically, like YouTube, Vimeo, they all auto-transcribe everything. So the searchable text is already there, even if you don't realize it.
But maybe we'll just get to a point where this is now literally true of everyone, and we just have to have a general social truce on this stuff, because you'll be able to find that for literally everyone. Like, I don't worry so much about myself, because, I mean, I am in a public speaking ideas career field. I should be held to a higher standard. You're held to a higher standard. If we're paid, employed to express ideas, and I get in trouble for something I say, well, that is my job.
Yeah.
That's different than, somebody who's just, works at a Starbucks or something and made a hand gesture that now we're being told is a white nationalist hand gesture, even though that just got made up 5 seconds ago. Like, that's the person who gets in trouble.
Yeah, it's
where
a
I'm
fake
like,
thing.
Do it.
It's
is
like,
a fake
hey,
thing.
okay, no, he's a Nazi for saying okay to his mom at the soccer game when he was 6.
Right, and the people who get upset about the experts in white nationalist iconography, symbiology, are like supposedly the anti-conspiracy people. Like, you sound like a conspiracy theorist if you're saying that everyone flashing a hand sign is secretly a Nazi. What are you talking about? Like, they end up being as paranoid and like crypto Nazi obsessed as the people they're supposedly going. That's neither here nor there. I'm hoping broad social truth needs to set in when it will be so easy to, or when you're not even going to be able to trust any images because they could all be manipulated to a impressive degree. You know, we'll stop canceling people. Maybe we'll stop canceling people for like having like your nude photos of you leaked because actually it's perfectly plausible and easy for an AI to create a nude photo of anyone. I don't know. The future is going to be an interesting place.
You have signed up for a job in which you must consume the news torrent on a regular basis. How do you keep yourself sane?
With great difficulty. I don't know that I have. But, you know, when I'm off the clock, I try not to pay attention to the news if I can help it. I do, you know, I tweet less than I used to. I used to be super active on Twitter, what we used to call Twitter. We now have to call X. I still kind of call it Twitter. Because before I had my show Rising, because I had a need to express my views on politics. Now that I talk for 3 hours on my show every day, I could care less what I say about politics in my downtime. You know, it's funny when you meet people, including at events like this, and they want to hear what you have to say about politics because they know me from my show, and I'll be like, I don't know, what do you think? I'll listen to you talk for a change. I don't have any need to hear my own voice any longer than I already do. So you just got, you know, I play a lot of video games. I do a lot of Dungeons and Dragons, nerd stuff with my coworkers. You know, I go to the gym a lot. You gotta. And when I'm at the gym, I will not listen to political podcasts. I do not listen to political podcasts. I do not listen to news. I listen to fiction, audiobooks, or listen to music sometimes. You have to have some place where you can be in a headspace that is not consuming news.
It seems like we have interesting dynamics happening with, you know, my son's 19, so the Gen Z, like in terms of politics. And that is that it looks like things are breaking in opposite directions for males and females, for boys and girls. And that in some respects, Gen Z has the largest cohort of like super conservative identifying people of any like generation at this stage, but also a larger cohort of like super ultra liberal. I hate to use this, progressive, identitarian, even communist. And it maps against actually, this is all the girls and this is a bunch of the boys. So how do you think about where we're heading in terms of like relating to each other when politics is driving us apart?
You're right about the gender split is very interesting. And a lot of conservatives will say that that's because modern society is hostile, or even the level of government policies have been hostile to traditional masculinity, or the avenues for young men have been stigmatized, that young men themselves have been stigmatized, and so they're turning away from a kind of political and cultural ideology that has no use for them and no place for them. I think that critique has some merit. It can also go too far because there are aspects of masculinity that have been unhealthy historically. I mean, men commit all of the violence in our society. Like statistically, if you look, it's not racial. It's not, you know, that's people want to make it about race, or there are mass shooters are disproportionately white or something. They're disproportionately male. All violence is disproportionately caused by men. And that would be, and it's a good thing that like schools have gotten actually less violent over time. It used to be socially acceptable to really like for young boys to like beat each other up. And now that was like a criminal matter if you do that. You can't do that as much, and it's good. The amount of like routine violence that young men had to face as part of growing up was not good. So
well, it's partly that, you know, when you have a school system built and designed by the same people that build and design the prisons, of course, schoolyard's going to be like a prison yard.
That's a good insight, and yeah, that is where I was going to go, and that you can take that too far. And now, because we've also stigmatized or made illegal just boyhood, you know, I mean, you know, walking to school by yourself, riding your bike by yourself, you know, the kind of free-range parenting. At Reason, we do a lot of work on those issues. My colleague Lenore Skenazy writes a lot about the explicit government policies that have made it impossible for young people to be active and to play by themselves on the playground or play with other kids, do all this normal, healthy adolescent development. That's disproportionately impacted boys because they're the more physically active sex. So there has been, I think, a rebellion against that. Yeah, that stuff is all bad, and we've gone way too far. And I'm so proud and thankful for the work Lenore and other people have done on to actually have to change the laws to make it so that kids can again walk to school by themselves, ride their bikes to the store, because parents get arrested for that stuff all the time. It's crazy.
It's incredibly loose definitions of neglect that have become basically an open door for Child Protective Services to get called by, the grumpy cat lady who's letting their kid take a walk.
And that stuff does disproportionately hurt black people and low-income families because they have more kids and they have less of a financial ability to get a babysitter or have someone, they got to work multiple jobs. Low-income people in general who are disproportionately racial minorities as well, they're working multiple jobs and they can't have someone watching the kids all the time. And that should be okay. That's how most of us grew up, having an older sibling take care of them or having the neighbor and the kids are left alone for a while, and usually it's fine. Now and then bad things happen. There is a role for the state, sometimes child services, but usually they're making things worse. Even if the family situation is not ideal. Do you know what's really not ideal? Having kids ripped from their homes and put in foster care, which is often abusive, at high rates of abuse. So the family situation has to be pretty bad and pretty dangerous for the best thing for these kids is for them to be put in different homes. And this happens at the drop of a hat, unfortunately, in low-income places and communities. It's bad.
In terms of navigating our political world and keeping yourself from becoming captured by the echo chamber, which is part of this thing too, right? Because the girls are going off here, the boys are going off here. But I think all of us also face this challenge of how to navigate the information landscape in a way that can keep us sane and feel like we believe things that aren't bullshit. Any advice?
Yeah, it's there are definitely some bad role models out there for young people, including, I would say, Andrew Tate, whose popularity I do not understand because he just seems like a very reprehensible individual. But has
you don't like Romanian sex trafficking? It's not your bag.
No, I don't like trapping women in basements to produce sexual content that he then disparages because he says women are all skanks and trash and whores. And but you're forcing them into these conditions. Maybe not forcing. You're incentivizing them to go into these conditions. It's very weird. I think the best thing would be do more of what I was advocating just a minute ago is to again make it decriminalize have young men socialize in a healthy way and play outdoors and have more traditional physical activity type things available to them. Everyone can benefit, even people at our ages can benefit from logging off now and then. Put your phone away, go for a jog, talk to somebody in person. Don't just be looking at your phone the whole time. That can help keep us sane. Politics feels very important because in some ways it has gotten more important because now the decisions are made at a more national level we all will have to abide by the rules of Donald Trump or Joe Biden or the team behind them, and the decision making is less democratized, less decentralized. It's very centralized. So I see why the stakes feel very high, but everything's probably going to be fine.
I like the optimism.
Technology, the market is amazing. I mean, we have Amazon now. Amazon is so great. Amazon, I could pull out my phone right now and be like, I want to order a pair of suspenders or something, and they'll be on my doorstep before I even get home tomorrow. And they're not expensive. That's amazing. Technology is making our lives easier and better all the time. It is outpacing the feeble attempts of our regulators to strangle these things in the crib. We should still fight against their efforts, but the future is probably going to be a pretty great place in a lot of ways, and I'm excited to see it. And you can become overly fatalistic if you're just paying attention to the news and the political landscape all the time. It's not good for the soul.
We're here at Freedom Fest, which is a libertarian conference. One of the things that I've personally been experiencing, and I've been talking to everybody I can who I feel like is thoughtful, and I think you're a thoughtful person.
Thank you.
I would call myself and my philosophy fundamentally liberal in the classical sense. We had Andrew Doyle on, and he called himself a liberal, and he had to qualify, like, well, you know, in London, in England, like, liberal means something different than in America. It means open, free, essentially our constitutional system is a liberal order. It feels like there's some kind of soft underbelly that has been exposed in liberalism, and this is, you know, as we come to a close. And I don't know what to do with that, but like I'm a little less certain where we go and what we need to do to protect the things that have made us so successful as a society. Like liberalism, properly understood, you can say libertarianism perhaps, but there's something that isn't clicking, or there's something that's I don't know if it's tolerating the intolerable, but something feels like it's going off the rails. Do you have that sense? Do you know what I'm talking about?
I think liberals of all stripes, in the broadest sense, that includes even libertarians, we all have to remember or reassert, rediscover the core of our ideology, which is leave people alone. Is that I don't know what's best for your life. Your situation might be different than mine. How you want to organize your community and your family might be fundamentally incompatible with how I would do it, and that's okay. That's perfectly fine. We all have to learn to mind our own business a little bit more. I mean, that's true of some of, you know, my fellow libertarian people on some of like this gender stuff, for instance. And, you know, I too have a lot of questions about or skepticism of some of the therapies and the procedures and the surgeries that are being recommended, that are now actually debated even by elites in other countries. They've done studies of this stuff and said, actually, we don't think this is good. And yeah, I get it. I don't think it's good. And if what I recommend for someone in my family or how I would approach this issue might be very different from how a progressive or something would. But still, do I think it should be in the realm of government policy making? No. Do I think if your kid wants this and your family's okay with it and you got a doctor who wants to do it, am I going to say the government should really come in and overrule that, even if I think that would be the best thing? No, because that's just, we're going to fight over everything. We're going to be knives out all the time if no one gets to live their life differently or have or think we're wrong. Because I don't know, maybe it's good for some people and bad for others. I don't know. It's just not my problem. We all have to remember that it's not your problem. It's somebody else's problem. And you can say what you think. We have free speech. You should certainly be able to do that. But we just can't control what other people are going to do. And the liberalism has moved away from that as its guiding light, certainly in the progressive liberal direction. But I think some ways even in a right libertarian on those fronts. Because I hear this issue animating a lot of people. And again, I get it. I have a lot of skepticism of what the medical establishment for a long time has said about it. But at the end of the day, I don't know, and I don't have to know, because it's not my job, and I'm not going to organize society, and no one really should. We should just all leave each other alone, right?
I ask every guest the same question at the end, last question, and that is, we call here at Emergent Order the show Dad Saves America, because I believe that one of the heroic roles we can play to protect liberty in this country is to be good fathers and to raise a generation that knows what it means to have agency, to want to exercise it, and to want to live in a free society so that they can exercise their agency, their mastery of themselves, and decide what kind of life they want to live, to have experiments in living, as John Stuart Mill said. How do you think about your role in the American story?
That's a broad question. Well, I don't have kids yet, unfortunately. I aspire to have kids someday. I have a lot of nieces and nephews that I love very dearly, and I'm everybody's favorite uncle because all my kids, my nieces and nephews, are obsessed with Nintendo and Pokemon and stuff like I'm still playing because I'm a big video game nerd, and I understand actually. Like my brothers and sisters-in-law, my brother, they're like, I don't know what the kids are talking about. Like, it's Pokemon cards. It's still popular. It's been popular since I was in the 5th grade. My role in the American story is to help tell it, is to be a writer and a commentator. Honestly, I actually prefer writing to speaking on TV. It's funny that people keep paying me now to have like television shows and express my thoughts. I never thought I was a very good public speaker. I hated public speaking as a kid. I never wanted to be in the school play. I never wanted to give a presentation in front of the class. I would get nervous. I was like not outgoing and charismatic. That's funny to think of now because now I could like stand up in front of any crowd and give a speech on any subject at any moment, even if I know nothing about it, because you just get used to talking in front of people, and my nerves are totally gone on that. And I don't mind being on TV, and I kind of enjoy it. But what I really like is writing and writing about issues that affect people in their communities in terms of this young people being able to live their lives free of government oppression, like I've been describing to you with Lenore's issues. So I aspire to keep researching and writing about stories and then get to talk about them on TV for making people feel freer, express the freedom that we are thankfully allowed to have in America, particularly on speech. I do a lot on First Amendment issues. That is an issue we're pretty protected from at the Supreme Court level. I look at like Europe does hate speech laws and all these other things that we are just non-starters with us. As politically divided as we are, again, the optimisms, we are in a good place on free speech. It could be better. I don't like that Murphy, Missouri decision either, but the Supreme Court has pretty universally said that even contemptible speech is protected at every level. And you have more ability to exercise your freedom of speech because of social media and all the platforms today. And that's a good thing. So my role is, I guess, to be one of those speakers.
Robby, thanks for being on Dad Saves America.
My pleasure.